Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Simmons, and I am the editor-in-chief at Simmons Bunton. I'm the editor-in-chief of Terrain.org. I'm here in Tucson, Arizona, where I respectfully acknowledge my presence on the unceded ancestral lands of the O'odham and the Pascua Yaqui. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. I want to thank first our readers, who will read in this order: Chaun Ballard, who's the winner of our inaugural Editor's Prize in Poetry. I'll post a link to that poem, that one, here in a bit. Thank you, Herrick, for joining us, poet and essayist and damn decent human being, for the record. And Rhina P. Espaillat, who's second in her quarterly Terrain.org series, which is called Knock Knock, Aquí Estamos, was published just this morning over at Terrain.org, a terrific poem titled Seedlings. And I'll add a link to that here in a bit. And if you see me looking away, it's just because I'm admitting folks as they join us here. Of course, I want to thank everybody in the audience, again, for spending your Monday evening with us. I want to thank our hostess, Suzanne Frischkorn, and I want to thank the Institute for Ethnic Studies at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, with special gratitude to the wonderful Joy Castro for sponsoring this event this evening. So, some house cleaning tips of sort. If your connection becomes slow, you may want to turn off your video. In all cases, at least until the Q&A, I ask that you please remain muted, but you're welcome to post your questions and other positive feedback in the chat. I know that the readers love to see that. So we are recording this, and all readings will be made available from the Terrain.org website and our YouTube channel, probably in a week or so on this one. We'd love it if you would officially follow our YouTube channel as well. And let's see, our series, as you know, let me admit a couple folks here, is held on the fourth Monday of every month. You're here today with us, obviously. And on June 28th, we are going to have Elizabeth Dodd, our nonfiction editor, who's here with us this evening as well, host Sandra Steingraber, Taylor Brorby, and Tammy Parker-Song in a reading of beautiful writers and activists sponsored, I think, by the Michael Donnelly Faculty Award at Kansas State University. I think, because I haven't actually confirmed that with Elizabeth and Kansas State. Oh, she gives me the thumbs up. Thank you. All right. We really appreciate the sponsorships, and I'll talk to folks in just a little bit here as to why that is. So links to register for that and all upcoming events may be found on Terrain.org, as well as our Facebook page. And if you are interested in sponsoring a reading, I admit we could use a couple more sponsors to carry us through the end of the year. You can contact me or any of us at info@terrain.org. Okay, so as we get going, I'll be posting book links in the chat in support of our readers this evening from their books. But if you missed those, or if you want to find the other books by tonight's readers and other Terrain.org contributors, well, first start at your local independent bookstore. Otherwise, hop on over to our bookshop page at bookshop.org/shop/terrain.org, which is really difficult to say 5 times fast. I've tried it. Or find the link under About in the Terrain.org website navigation menu. Finally, if I may, a word about Terrain.org, the world's first online journal of place, publishing since 1998. We are an all-volunteer organization that doesn't charge to access our content, nor charge to submit, except for the contest, nor contain advertising at all. Indeed, we are run by the power of goodwill and dedicated weekends and evenings, and I'm going to say love, because we love all of you, we love our contributors, we love our readers, each and every one of you. And we're also run by donations from good folks like you, who are welcome to donate online at terrain.org/donate. So thank you for your support and for being a part of the Terrain.org community. So now let us turn to the reading, followed by Q&A. You can post your questions in the chat area at any time, and then we'll work our way through those after the reading. And thanks again for joining us. So it's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's host, Suzanne Frischkorn. Suzanne is the author of Lit Window Pane and Girl on a Bridge, both from Main Street Rag Press, and 5 chapbooks. Her honors include the Aldrich Poetry Award for her chapbook Springtide, selected by Mary Oliver, an Emerging Writers Fellowship from the Writers Center for her book Lit Window Pane, and an Individual Artist Fellowship from the Connecticut Commission on Culture and Tourism. She is an editor for the new literary journal Money Sign Poetry is Currency. I'm never quite sure how to say that because it's literally a dollar sign, which is at poetryiscurrency.com. And she serves on the terrain.org editorial board. Be sure to check out this new journal, by the way, after this reading. Not during, but after the reading. Not just for the amazing work that they're already publishing, and they really are, but check out the About page, which I particularly love, Suzanne. I love that sort of mantra. I think it's awesome. So that's more or less the official bio on Suzanne, but let me also add that I met Suzanne virtually through the poet blogging world, what I like to call the poet industrial complex of the early and mid 2000s, and I admired her poetry right away. Then, as Suzanne, you may recall, we got to spend a little time together at AWP in New York, which I think was a couple AWPs in New York back. And then she joined us early in our Letter to America efforts over at terrain.org, which began with the 2016 election. Her poem, simply titled Dear America, remains one of my favorites published in terrain.org, Letter to America or otherwise. So find it online or in the book Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy, where, by the way, you can also find letters from Lee Herrick and Rhina Espaillat. So let me now gladly turn it over to Suzanne. Take it away.
Simmons, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I am so pleased to be here tonight because Terrain has had a special place in my heart. It's been near and dear to me for so many years. And I want to welcome everyone and thank you so much for coming. We have a wonderful lineup of accomplished and acclaimed readers for you tonight. We are going to start with our first reader. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Chaun Ballard. He is an affiliate editor for Alaska Quarterly Review, a graduate of the MFA program at the University of Alaska Anchorage, and a doctoral student. His chapbook, Flight, was the winner of the 2018 Sunken Garden Poetry Prize and was published by Tupelo Press. His poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Narrative, Rattle, Terrain.org, the New York Times, Tupelo Quarterly, and other literary magazines. He is also the winner of the Terrain Editors Prize for his powerful poem, Day 40, in the Letter to America series. Chaun Ballard.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Simmons. I'm very grateful to be here. Hopefully everyone can hear me very well. I'm excited to read with our other poets here today, who I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy, and I'm ready to enjoy them as well once I'm done reading these poems and the pressure's off. All right. So I'm going to start with a poem from my chapbook, and then I'll read a couple others. So this poem is titled Midway. I read it a few places before, so some of you may have heard it. If you have, just indulge me, and we'll all feel like this poem is new to us somehow, some way. So Midway, and then after that, I will read Day 40, the poem that won the Editor's Prize for terrain.org. All right. Midway. So now when the ghosts ask me my age, I say, I'm stomach over the waistband. I'm button up and neck tied. I'm shoes no longer the last squawking on hard wooden floors. I'm totem pole carved with faces of the past. I'm apple for lunch, walnuts, and pleasant dinners. I'm Red Cross bloodletting and good credit. I'm my father in that faded Polaroid taken somewhere in California. I'm high school reunion, almost checked the box, maybe. I'm electric slide and Jesus music, hallelujahs and morning glory. I'm open book and lamplight. I'm Achilles if he lived during the Renaissance. I'm nearly in danger of not being a danger, old enough to say you were good and died young. Okay. This next poem is titled Day 40. And I should say I have a couple of these pandemic poems, poems that were written during the pandemic. So I'll read a couple of those. So Day 40. Maybe the ice is still decaying in the Arctic. Maybe when we are curbed near our corner window, tails wagging as another ancestor or close kin passes by, and the polar bears move further south to elope with brown bears, maybe the Arctic becomes a melting pot, and the polar bears find existence. Maybe not. I am told when the trigger finds its target offspring, a polar grizzly dies. Their instinct, I am told, is no longer grizzly in a sense, no longer bear who kills because you have stumbled along its path where it leaves you for dead, but a mulatto hunter who will eat you behind lush green eyes. Maybe the ice then is not decaying glacial lines. Maybe so. Maybe I'm just talking about being Black. Maybe not. Maybe Mother Nature is the one with lush green eyes on her comeback, riding our brokenness, slow moving like a bronco. And as a senior citizen, the only true believer left. Maybe not. For all we know, dolphins spinning, swans voguing, and jellyfish doing whatever it is jellyfish do are all on their return to Venetian waters, like clear skies over New Delhi, a coyote to Michigan Ave, black bears, I swear, to a studentless campus, partially observant as rural flowers, without mask, keeping 6 feet above soil, like New Yorkers, fearfully aiding one another. Then, of course, maybe not. Maybe there are others who have their right to assemble, angry to the eyeballs with stimulus checks no one will give back. Maybe theirs may be an ice age of another kind, a different story of grocery stores filled with empty shelves, Purell for cleaning, clean hands, tissue paper for dabbing tears, and bathrooms. Then, of course, there is the economy and that night owl above my cousin's porch, April in St. Louis circling the living air. So then maybe the question is not whether we will touch distant, but how and when our want to resist will end.
Beautiful.
All right, so this next poem is a little longer, and it's still a pandemic poem. Maybe you'll pick that up in this, maybe not, but it's definitely a walking poem, and I seem to write a lot of walking poems because I enjoy going out on walks with my wife. So this is one of those walking poems. This is titled, Survival is a Matter of Perspective When. Survival is a matter of perspective when we step 4 feet onto the pavement, my wife and I, confident in what we know will be a good jog, to air out whatever it is the robins sing. With each breath, the runner before us turns, torn, then retreats back in failure, the length of a sidewalk. On our right, a moose comes into frame, maybe a yearling, perhaps the same from May 15th, abandoned almost instinctually by its mother in preparation for her newborn. The moose has aged in tree trunk, a UPS delivery truck in fur, tall enough to raise its head from the ground over the 7-foot wooden fence. Who said good fences make good neighbors? How I relish this, Wish it became more than a proverb, applicable in all situations. But the truth is, what holds beautiful in one context does not hold beautiful when misused in another. For example, there are only a few bad apples for some implies that if you purchase a bushel, identify the bad ones, remove a few rotten Hurlsons, there is no great loss. In essence, the others may be salvaged. But what if the few bad apples were identifiably pilots, joked Chris Rock. What if the airline said, we have a few bad apples, pilots that like to crash into mountains. Please bear with us. Would you bear with them? See how the fence changes. See how the moose remains there across the street like the only tree absent of flower and fruit. See how its shade of tree trunk bears none. Bad apples, who took you out of context? Who bruised you into new proverb? When we know one bad apple spoils the bunch. Now see how the moose turns to look at us, and we turn into statues. Now it no longer sees another woman in her sunglasses gliding along its path. And my God, it's such a beautiful day. We all should stay safe from such tragedy to have our moment a while longer in the sun, like a branch of apple blossoms before descending red globes. In Alaska, we call this June 4th and Thursday. Now see how everything slows down after all the buildup, the moose, the woman, when all you want to hear is what happens. Because you now have a picture that is not unlike a passenger train with joy-filled faces who wave at the locals in each town and crossing. Each beautiful mile, peaceful, hands raised in solidarity to a window. And see how I've said nothing of metaphor outright. I've said nothing of police, nor the view from a riot-proof frame. See how this is the first time I mention riot when I mention police. This is called rhetoric. And the moose does not see the woman on her bike as we see the woman on her bike, a blissful train approaching from the opposite end of the same track. And no one has to tell you who lives. And it is such a beautiful day. And the sun is where it should be. And the breeze is light and pleasant. And I'm trying to hold on to the moment a while longer for the woman's sake. But repetition is impending, and the emperor's hand is causing tension, evoking a response. But even an emotional response is situational, because repetition is a rhetorical device. And because this poem has the power to delay, but not build a fence, nor resolve the situation that will end in the body of the poem. Which means repetition does not forewarn in every situation. Which means if you look like the woman, you keep riding your bike towards danger with your eyes on the interracial couple. If you are a moose, you're still looking at the threat for a positive ID. And if we yell moose several times, neither of the two will see the other. The moose will deem us threat. The woman may think argument. And if she sees the moose before it is too late, she may turn around. In Alaska, a moose attacks when it feels threatened. A A bike rider rides their bike because it's summer. When you think of repetition, what comes to mind? In most communities, if you look like me, inner city, in contrast to a picket fence, the woman calls the police. She calls the police. She calls the police. If she survives, perhaps half of a whole couple runs out of time. All right, this one is a poem I was trying to figure out a title for, but the title actually worked for the poem. And so this one is titled Working Title, and it's an abecedarian. All right. Working title. A, as in the first time I was addressed after an evening avenuing down the boulevard, mining my own scratch, knowing a simple whiff of anyone's smoke was hazardous, to sniff up any old tree standing buck-kneed like a display on a fractured sidewalk of someone's "you ain't from around here." Smiling through a chipped tooth depression with the root of his tree bark like a toothpick home in the crevice of incisor and canine was not wise. More like an A, B. Wasn't that the cat eyeing your girl? Or A, because he noticed the red in my Cardinals cap, which would be cool if I were in a gang or chasing after a pop fly. But out here it's either to live or die like LA, or become a Padres fan, or a type of Benedict Arnold schmoozing Blue Jays in Fenway Park, which got me to thinking. Everything must have started with a big bang. Someone had to throw out the first pitch. The first stick must have echoed off the first home run that shattered a universe of windows and left fragments of glass twinkling like tiny orbs in the rear view of my mother-in-law's mirror, blurring my vision. Or a disco ball, or glitter in the gloves of a singular Jackson, a singularity one might call the 80s. Someone had to throw out the first cowbell, the first haymaker that left the first glass jaw in starlight days, a jab, then a right, then a bang, right in the kisser of someone who would rather be hugged than a head in laurel, or a ring of stars hovering around someone else's good night. I didn't want to be either. Though I do admit I've been kicked in my jubilees once and twice, and I felt the faint twinge in my gut whenever I strolled down the back streets of someone else's salvation, where with a homeboy, one is conflicted as to whether he should keep my jacket for himself as spoil or alternate Mondays with his homeboy. So I escaped the valley of his mind long enough to warrant a visit, which is precisely why this poem has a working title. Because what do you call a bang that has not happened? An existential bang, a bang in theory, a theory that does not exist, like in theory he was, he appeared to be, he reached for, what was to me, what I perceived to be, a gun, the theory of presumption, of opposition, of opposites attracting, the singular bang, a hot and infinitely dense point whose eve brought forth, raised, came perfectly. So much so on and so forth became an orderly fashion, a quagmire, quintessentially. A theory in quasi-physics, which means if somehow you haven't yet discovered, I'm quasi-knowledgeable about everything, which makes me the master of nothing, which is to say, I know nothing, only that I don't know enough to render an explanation, if possible, of why the bang in my adolescence watched me passed down the alleyway of a narrowing universe, with his boy trailing behind while he ran to cut me off at the opening between two walls, or our eyes connected in surprise, finding there a fence 10 feet high. I would have missed 9 times out of 8 had it not been for the sloth in their plan that aided my escape, in theory. Or perhaps later took the shape of another in his jacket. In an alternate universe, his blood mixing with soil, red as a red bird, the chrism ring of my cardinal's laurel rendering the spoils unsalvageable. What I'm saying here is, without a working title, a poem could muddle meaning, confuse purpose, become vicious, or a world-rocking super split from a singular form similar to a black hole, which, after receiving a charge, is fired like a gunshot, like an X-ray, revealing the shadow of a fragment in the back of another, which could have been your name, in theory. An all-black universe with stars circling in halo after a wild haymaker sent a body to the canvas, knees buckling, good night at best, at worst, a bang into someone else's zodiac. I'd like to thank you guys again for this opportunity to read these poems, and I'm very much looking forward to our next readers. And I will end with this last poem. I've been dabbling, gabbling with environmental poems and with nature poems. And I'm always trying to figure out what is considered environmental poem or what is considered a nature poem. And am I really writing one? I guess I question myself every now and again, because so much of my life has been spent in what we would say these urbanized cities, right? So I'm learning to find nature no matter where I am, and enjoy it and embrace it no matter where I am. And so this is my last kind of pandemic poem here, and I was excited to write it because it did have some, what I would say, urban nature in it. And so I will end with this one. I'm doing it, I cried out. I'm writing a nature poem. I'm dancing. The warm waters of the Kasilof got me dreaming about salmon, or I'm dreaming about salmon in the warm waters of the Kasilof, or I'm dreaming I'm holding you, holding on to you like you are one long embrace. You are one long embrace I'm dreaming of holding, like a reflection on water, like a dream of salmon, a run of sockeye in a river of mirrors, 1,000 shattered plates used for dancing, a wedding dance of 1,000 dinings returning like salmon, purposeful, to a house of mirrors. We sit within, drinking what is only brewed ginger in a kettle used for brewed ginger and nothing else. The old lady serves it hot like fire. In the back of our throats, a river settles, hot like fire, several thousand years of good luck. The walls of her house, less wall than mirror. In an ice sculpted scene of America when our city is vodka on rocks. And everything is receiving and is receiving light. As snow releases a branch of starlings who bathe in the sun, who dive into the ocean of unmelted mounds left over by the plower who releases in the second hand, turning somewhere between the index and thumb, used to inject a needle in the wellspring of the body, while neighbors flock to the sidewalk like a chattering of starlings, or the sidewalk is a chattering of starlings, or the chattering is our neighbor beneath us and her 3-year-old schnauzer chattering back. They are a couple, married with no children, chattering like one is untrained in the art of quarantine. The children shout and run, and they are our neighbors, and we are their neighbors without children, untrained in quarantine. The fly has returned to open our window, and the aphids are packed and ready to leave. It is April, and the aphids should really be going. We have housed them all winter, partook in their grief. As for you, I mean not to detain you much longer. This poem is not a garden to partake in its grief. Detained in their yard, the children are starlings, their parents aphids in a glow of neem. My love, we're snow melt when all the snow is fallen. No, my love, the snow melts like all the world is fallen. No, my love, like all the world is fallen in love from our rooftops. Fallen, the snow melts from our rooftop. My loves, when all the snow has fallen from our rooftops, dare I call you spring. Thank you very much.
Chaun, that was wonderful. I always am so impressed. Can you hear me? Okay. When I see a poem, poets write these long poems and that they keep the energy of every single line and they keep your attention, that always impresses me because I can't do that. But those were so evocative and so powerful. Your moose poem, I forget the title, it moved me to tears. It was just stunning. Really. Thank you so much for reading tonight. It's my first introduction to your work. It was really wonderful. So thank you. All right. Next up, our next reader is Lee Herrick. He is the author of Scar and Flower and 2 other books of poems, Gardening Secrets of the Dead and This Many Miles from Desire. He is co-editor of The World I Leave You, Asian American Poets on Faith and Spirit, Horizon Books, 2020, Origin, I think. His poems appear widely in literary magazines, textbooks, and anthologies, such as One for the Money, The Sentence as Poetic Form, Indivisible, Poems of Social Justice, with an introduction by Common, Here, Poems for the Planet, with an introduction by the Dalai Lama, California Fire and Water, and Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy, among others. Born in Daejeon, Korea, and adopted to the United States at 10 months, he served as Fresno Poet Laureate from 2015 to 2017. He lives in Fresno, California, and teaches at Fresno City College and the MFA program at Sierra Nevada University. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you so much. It's good to see you even through the screen here, and appreciate you having me and for the introduction. And thank you, Simmons, for this series and for everything you do at terrain.org and for the writing community in general. Really excited to hear Chaun's work. That was fantastic. Great to be reading with you, and really an honor to be reading with the one and only Rhina Espaillat as well. So thank you all for joining. And I will say before I get into it, that I hope individually or collectively we can all celebrate a long, difficult 1.5 years or so, however you're able to. But I hope you're doing well wherever you are. So I'm going to read first my letter. It's not a poem, but it is the letter that appeared in the anthology that Simmons has mentioned. It's called Dear America. I'm going to try to hold it up. Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy. And it's a hefty anthology, and it's really one, and I'm not saying this because I'm in it, I swear, but it really is one of the most impressive anthologies I've seen in many, many years. It's edited by Simmons and Elizabeth Dodd and Derek Sheffield, who I think are also on the call, and it's brilliantly edited and very compassionately curated, so I hope you can check it out. The anthology, I think from the introduction, started from a letter from Alison Hawthorne Deming, if I'm not mistaken, right after Trump was elected. I'm just gonna get that name out of my mouth, hold on. I try not to say his name because it's too much, but I wrote mine after, it was in December when I wrote it, right before he was about to take office. It's called Each One a Bright Light, and it's several minutes, which I hope is okay. Dear America, I was born outside of you in Korea in 1970, a year of upheaval and revolution. I was adopted and arrived in America in October 1971, at 10 months of age on your West Coast, at the San Francisco International Airport, to be exact, where I was adopted by a white American couple. In the year I was born, 1970, upheaval and change was everywhere. The Vietnam War continued. The shootings at Kent State rocked Ohio and the world. Angela Davis was fired by UCLA, and Richard Nixon signed a measure into law lowering the voting age to 18. In the same year, both Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin died. It was 2 years after Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy were killed. In many ways, it was a brutal time of major change, but beneath the headlines, tragic or sickening as they may be, America's best self was always churning, always evolving. Even when it's nearly indiscernible, I believe that America is, in fact, a beautiful idea. Even in the face of great trauma or tragedy, political distress, or economic trouble, America churns forward. The America I love is in the people's heartbeat, the Americans who try their best to overcome or live through what inevitable failures and setbacks will temporarily rattle us. In May 1975, I was naturalized and became a US citizen. There's a picture of me at 4 years old, dressed in a dark suit, holding the flag, standing in front of a larger flag. In 1977, my kindergarten teacher played her acoustic guitar and sang, "This land is your land," to the class, and I distinctly remember liking the song and her spirited rendition of it, but I also remember questioning it. It's the first memory I have of feeling unsettled because of race. I was the only Asian American in the class of 30 white children. I would soon experience and continue to experience your particular brand of racism. I would learn that because I was not born in this country, I could never become president. I would not have made a good president, but I can think of some transnational adoptees who would. I became a student of you. I recently learned that 9 of the first 11 US presidents owned slaves. John Adams and his son, John Quincy, were the only 2 who did not. So we have a long way to go and some hard self-exploration to do. I'm a student of your presidential history and did my master's thesis on 20th century presidential rhetoric and Aristotelian theory. I also became a student of one of your greatest failures, your inability to grant legal, social, and economic liberty and justice to all people. We can say that progress has been made, and in fact, there has been. But then I recall that there are 892 active hate groups in this country, and that one of the most notorious recently endorsed a presidential candidate who won. I hope your better angels keep churning. There are many who live here who are suffering and struggling, but you know this. You know there are many who don't care about the suffering, and what would you say to them? I wonder how you look at your own youth, at your own breathtaking diversity, at the state of your own disrepair. I wonder if you believe, like I do, that if we are to keep forming that more perfect union, We must evolve. We must keep churning forward. We must welcome the immigrant, the refugee, and the transnational adoptee. We must balance the rapid broadcast of our failures and disgust with the beautiful stories of resistance and the truths of Americans forging new and necessary revolutions. Division is inevitable with an idea so great as you. And while we may take step back at times, and this feels like one to be sure, I'm certain that you're durable, that your bones are good, that your foundations are solid. Are there limits to democracy's elasticity? We'll see. I believe you when you say that you stand for equality and liberty and justice, but you're currently far short of the mark. For now, though, I want to celebrate you. I also want to fight for what is good in you and the ideas you espouse. There are millions of people who do so every day. There will be more travesties, more fires, and more demagogues. But I vow to keep the faith. I vow to care. I imagine millions and millions of people here in America, each one a bright light, thinking and dreaming like I am, certain about the better days ahead. Yours, Lee Herrick. So that took longer than I thought. So I'm just going to read some poems from my latest book, Scar and Flower. The first half of this is a lot of violence and gun sorts of violence. So this is sort of a short poem after written for the families and the victims in late 2012 at Newtown, Connecticut, Sandy Hook Elementary, when 20 first graders were killed. What I hear after the massacre and what I mistake for my heart after Newtown. Invisible birds shocked out of the trees, and you mistake them for children on the playground, or you mistake the leaves cracked underfoot for the children's hush or broken glass. It's a maelstrom. At the winter program, the first graders sing, "Let It Snow," and the parents clasp their hands, half exhale, half prayer. The children sing in your town, and you think of the children in the shattered town. And all that comes to you is their hearts, heaven, hell, and the next kind word you will say to a boy. 2014, there were a lot of horrible deaths or murders. One of Michael Brown in Ferguson and Eric Garner and Tamir Rice was on my mind as among others. He was 12, killed by police in Cleveland. What I hear when I hear you in my head, it's the little whisper, the aggregate sorrow, the father's heavy weeping as the son's heavy weeping. What I hear is your artistic response after the massacre, the family of clasped hands, black hands, brown hands, a smile, a small child whose brother never had a chance, who holds her father's tearful face and says, "Your eyes are like the moon," is what I hear when I hear you in my head this evening, your laughter like tiny harps. I hear your fatigue as another way to say deprivation. I hear recount, retally. A retaliation is what I hear when I hear you in my head this evening. It's the grace, the charm, the dead, the boy, the dead boy, the boy who died because of the fear, the forest in the other man's heart, the gun, The heartbreak is the sound I hear when I hear you in my head, is how we each sigh with distinction, where fatigue meets fire, where we wake and wonder, if we all go out to a field tonight, sit by a fire, say the most honest thing you've ever said in your life, would any dead boy or girl reappear? Not like a mirage, but reappear. Not like a voice in my head, but a body in this room, with flesh and bones, with his big smile and orange blossoms in his billowing hair. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to jump forward a lot and just read two more, I think. Maybe I can do this short one too. This is sort of a shorter one. This is a little bit of a change of pace. It's called Exile. Our natural state is not defensive or tense, but water in a resting state. We state this to be true in an age of inquiry, our failure to put what is just before ease. There are lovers in another country reclining by a fire, admitting love in a common language with faith in the exiles of their state, where a woman looks at her friend and says, please, put down your bag and stay. Please, stay to see how the movie ends. I think the city might go up in flames. Okay, so I'm gonna read a sort of a Korean adoption-ish poem. I don't know about anybody else if I can geek out for a moment, but sometimes I want to read over in the chat and then I'm like, oh, there's nothing over there. And then I get sidetracked like I am right now. Okay, so here's an adoption poem. It was written for my birth mother or my first mother who I've never met. And I think also it's about all transnational adoptees, or at least in my mind, I was thinking of other Korean adoptees when I wrote this as well. So it's called How Music Stays in the Body. Your body is a song called Birth or First Mother, a miracle that gave birth to another exquisite song. One song raises 3 boys with a white husband. One song fought an American war overseas. One song leapt from 14 stories high and like a dead bird shattered into the clouds. Most forgot the lyrics to their own bodies or decided to paint abstracts of mountains or moons in the shape of your face. I've been told mothers don't forget the body. I can't remember your face, the shape or story, or how you held me the day I was born. So I wrote 1,000 poems to survive. I want to sing with you in an open field, a simple room, or a quiet bar. I want to hear your opinions about angels. Truth is, angels drink too. Soju spilled on the halo, white wings sticky with gin, as if any mother could forget the music that left her. You should hear how loudly I sing now. I've become a ballad of wild dreams and coping mechanisms. I can breathe now through any fire. I imagine I got this from him or you, my earthly inheritance, your arms, your sigh, your heavy song. I know all the lyrics. I know all the blood. I know why angels howl into the moonlight. Okay, so, you know what? I think that is good. Thank you very much.
Lee, those are so powerful. I read your letter to America in the anthology when I first got it, and I think you're right about that anthology. It's a necessary anthology for our times. I remember being very moved by your letter, so it was really wonderful to hear you read it. And that all your poems are powerful tonight. You read so beautifully. And I know we've met before many years ago, but this is the first time I've seen you read. So it was really wonderful to hear you. The poem about your birth mother was very moving, very beautiful, very evocative. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne.
We are going to move on to our final reader, who deserves her own show. I can tell you that from the beginning, from before we went live with everyone else. Dominican-born Rhina P. Espaillat. She is the author of 17 collections comprising poetry, short stories, essays, and translations. Her work appears in numerous periodicals and anthologies and has earned many national and international awards. She is a frequent reader, speaker, visiting poet, and workshop leader at literary events. And she is also the co-founder of the Fresh Meadow Poets in New York and the Powwow River Poets in Massachusetts. Knock Knock, Aquí Estamos, where readers will find rich intercultural insight, lyricism, and zing, is her new quarterly terrain.org series. Welcome, Rhina.
Thank you very, very much for the introduction, and thank you, Simmons, for the invitation. And thank you to everybody who made this possible, because it has been one gorgeous reading. I'm delighted to be here, but I'm also terrified because those were two very tough acts to follow. Really, really, those were wonderful readings. I've selected poems that are all about nature, but not about the usual positive look at nature that we all like to adopt. It's more about the troubled relationship that we've always had with nature right from the beginning. The way that that religion and nature, for instance, sometimes fight it out. The way that that nature and the city fight it out, the way that we pretended in the 19th century and in the 18th a little bit too, but mostly the 19th, that nature could teach us how to live. Nature will teach you how to be a better person. No, it may not, possibly not. Nature kills, nature eats, nature is red in claw and fang and so forth. So there are inequalities, there are spaces there that we can't quite meet in. And yet, it's the one thing that we can count on forever. It's the one thing that we share. It's our planet. It's our home. So I'm going to read poems about nature, but from different ways and with the human eye involved. This one is called Residence. It's from my first book, now out of print. Residence. Our tree, silenced of leaves, is loud with birds whose autumn music says a kind of green, lovely for all the strangeness of the words. We like to think we fathom what they mean, but they don't speak to us. They're making plans among themselves, plotting some ancient route or counting losses real as any man's, the likelihood of frost, the dearth of fruit, or more than these. They mirror image preening leaves in the wind, fall in reverse toward blue, as if to say, but who's to know their meaning? We say they sing because we want them to. And this one is a little bit darker. It's called A Winter Walk. And this came from a real walk in Horsley Park. We followed paw prints like cuneiform, tracks that said possum on the page of snow. I pictured finding something curled up warm wherever such things go. But at trail's turning, came upon no burrow cradling our quarry in the crystal field, but something smaller, torn beyond all sorrow that mercy could not shield. The tracks we followed on a winter day for pleasure, for delight in all that moves, ticked on alone. We took another way, blood settled in the grooves. And here is a poem that you have to imagine quite a bit here. It's called If You Ask Me. If you ask me, said the snake, this couple's doomed. They started naked, not a thing to need, a thing to wonder at, since orders boomed over the speaker. Every day they weed a little, see what's ripe and pluck it off. Cut, eat this, no, don't eat that. Now, I'm not blind. I see her fidget with her hair and cough that nervous cough. She's bored out of her mind. I see him gawk at birds and flap in vain. Then his blank eyes cloud over with the sky and circle his estate, so green, so plain. She's ripe to risk herself. They need to die. Unbanished, he's an ornament, a brute. We're neighbors. I'll go visiting with fruit. And we all know what snake that is. And I hate to admit it, but I'm on the snake side. I'm going to read a pair of poems now. The first one I wrote in Spanish, and then I translated it into English. And it's called For My Great-Great-Grandson, the Space Pioneer. Now, I'm very old, older than the hills, but I do not have any great-great-grandson yet. Take my word for it. I'm just imagining, because I think one of the things I love about poetry is the fact that you can do time travel with it. You can travel back to people you never met because they died millennia ago, and you can travel into the lives that you have not seen yet and that you will never see. So I'll read it in Spanish first. How many of you remember Spanish from school? No Spanish? A little bit, okay, good. See if you can catch something. Para mi tataranieto, el astro pionero. Tú, fulanito, que por los caminos de mi sangre te lanzas al futuro, dime si te llevas los 1000 sabores del viento, la voz del río, las lenguas de musgo y helecho que cantan la tierra. ¿Y dónde dejaste la lluvia? Que no se te pierda. Ni el gemir de la gaviota en su desierto azul, ni esas estrellas tibias como caricias que no encontrarás en tus noches de acero. Fíjate que no te falten mariposas. Apréndete el color de las horas y toma que en esta cajita de huesos te dejo el perfume de los mares. For my great-great-grandson, the space pioneer. You, what's your name, who down the highways of my blood are hurtling toward the future. Tell me if you've packed the 1,000 flavors of the wind, the river's voice, the tongues of moss and fern singing the earth. And where have you left the rain? Careful, don't lose it, nor the moan of the seagull in her blue desert, nor those stars warm as caresses you will not find again in your nights of steel. Watch that you don't run short of butterflies. Learn the colors of the hours. And here, in this little case of bones, I've left you the perfume of the sea. So I hope he's listening. This is my third book, and this one is called March. And sometimes we're in sync with the season. Sometimes we feel, this is exactly the way I feel right now, the way the sunshine looks. And sometimes we feel the opposite. Sometimes we feel, oh, please be over and send me something else. So this is March. Sing me once more your morning litany, bird shuttling without rest from brittle twig to naked branch of each unsheltering tree. Promise me shoots, earth still too cold to dig. Pronounce yourself again, green blessing, kiss of the sun. Persuade me, bees, do not be mute. Read me the names of months kinder than this. Remind me of the taste of summer fruit. The heart is stubborn in its unbelief, remembering how beginnings harden down to this recurrent metaphor for grief. Geese pouring north above my wintry town. You've heard some news, you know why you returned. Teach me again again, until I learn. And here is, oh, I hang up bird feeders, and the birds are a gift from heaven. And there is one, I don't know what it is. My son is a bird maven. He knows all about what the songs of each bird sounds like. But this one says, here, here, here. And I swear it's an invitation. What bird are you? Repeating here, 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 and later what to do, as if distraught, and what to do again. And yet it's clear you're neither calling me nor overwrought, but occupied and singing quite by chance, almost unseen, your feathered self, aware of nothing but each pressing circumstance, each straw for your light carpentry midair, tosses out songs in passing, line by line, not consciously, but idly thrown away on strangers' ears, as ignorant as mine. And still I hear you say the things you say, swear I could almost knock on your green door, as if you meant it, and I knew what for. I love the birds. If I forget to fill the feeder, or if I let it go empty too long, they look at me like this. They really get very serious. I don't know how they fold their wings, but they do it. This, oh yes, this is called The Marsh in Early Spring. The marsh in early spring, and I think this one was written because we're told so often that the nature knows. Nature is much wiser than we are. No, it's not. No, it's not. Nature is in charge of being. The gift of nature is to be, and to be what it is. We know things, and we're not always happy about what we know. So that's an important difference, and I think we should be honest and remember it. The marsh in early spring, that patient view, accommodating clouds and changing blue, reflects both in a deeply shallow gaze, where everything finds room and nothing stays. Stippled with rain, or riffled as by oars plied by the wind in passing between shores, the marsh is neither different nor the same, both moving and at rest, like tide or flame. Heaven is what it looks at, and then makes double below, in silty brown, where snakes crook their thick-muscled length through tangled weeds. The marsh will never fathom what it reads. The sea that salts its grasses, the gulls cry, nothing inscribed in what we call the sky. I don't want you to think I have a prejudice against the 19th century. I don't. It's just that I'm a realist. When we sold the tent, and this reminds me of one of the happiest chapters of our lives, we took 6 trips across the country, my husband and I, because we had a summer off. We were both teachers, so we took the summer off. We had no money, but lots of time. And we crossed the country and saw every bit of it except for 4 states that we never got to. But eventually we were a little old for sleeping on the ground, or for sleeping on half empty mattresses and so on. And we had to get rid of the tent, just couldn't anymore. When we sold the tent, we threw in the Grand Canyon with its shoal of pines, lap full of cones and chipmunks and crooked seams of river. We let them have the parched white moonscapes of Utah and Colorado's Magnificat of flowers sunbursting hill after hill. Long, gentle stretches of Wyoming, rain outside some sad Idaho town where the children, giddy with strange places, clowned all night. Eyes like small veiled moons circling our single light. Sleek shadows with paw prints, all went with the outfit. And youth, a river of campfires. And I should show you the cover. This is my favorite book cover because my husband made the sculpture. He was a shop teacher, an industrial arts teacher, but his real love was art. So he painted and sculpted. And this was when he saw this one, and I saw it in his wonderful mess in the basement. I said, "Oh, Alfred, I need to have that one for a book cover." And I love it. And this poem is called Quiet Now. Quiet now. The wind is reading a story, riffling through green volumes of spruce and balsam, unearthing fables from the ruins of lichen, elucidating parables of crows propped open on the lectern of naked maples. Patience. The wind is reading a long story with miracles in it, rumors of the marsh weeping for joy over the sky's reflection, promise of resurrections, of pale crocus lifting its crown from the wreckage of summer, skimming every field, uncovering old plots on those white pages time writes on, deaf as the heart in its cage of longing. Be still now, listen, the wind is reading you a story. And this is my most recent one. And this is a little bit longer. This is called The Jury. The Jury. In a bare tree, 4 strangers gathered from afar slipped into talk, as travelers do. First Eagle said, "How strange they are, these creatures lately come to climb our cliffs and spy upon our brood. They have no constancy, but drift from mood to mood, first wanton slaughter, and now zeal to build our hunted tribe again. I cannot fathom them at all." "They are called men," said Pigeon, "and I know them well. I've learned their secret. All they use from day to day to guide their steps are just their shoes. It's true, my friends. In new spiked boots, yesterday's farmer struts the street, turned killer, and tomorrow dies derelict with rag-bound feet. More out of sympathy than need, I gather their spilled crumbs to know toward what new grief their wayward shoes would have them go." "And yet," said Sparrow, "I have known some who would leave their lighted nest to scatter seed through razor winds for our sake, lest we hunger through December days. I've seen them fling their gaze above their comforts to pursue us with something like love." "True," Vulture said, "for they love me and have my welfare much in mind. In Leningrad, in Lebanon, men were most kind and nourished me with their own young. Vietnam, Verdun, Angola, Troy, Thermopylae, the love of men is my chief joy." "Well, that's as may be," Eagle said, "but they are feeble things at best. Condemned to winglessness, they creep in their own shadow, flight obsessed. A sad smudge upon the earth, half willingly erased at last. We will possess our own again when they have passed." But I'm not dying for that day to come. I would like to hang around. I just want the Eagle to know that. And this, I'm going to finish with this one, which was set to music and performed, and it sounded lovely. Everything sounds better with music. I do a lot of melopías, which is song, not song, but poetry spoken to music in the background, and it works beautifully. 3 tenses of light. Sky, meadow. I should tell you how this came about. We were asked to look at paintings in a gallery that's in our town in Newburyport. Choose a poem and choose a painting and write a poem about it or for it or to it or what have you. So that's what I did. It was a beautiful, beautiful painting of a marsh. I love marshes. And then they set music to it, and we did the performance with all 3 arts present: the painter, the poet, and the composer. 3 tenses of light. Sky, meadow, and marsh. A trinity of waters, 3 tenses of light. Tattered horizon, the far fringes of morning where new light rises. Daylight advancing, igniting sudden loosestrife, taking the meadow. Cloud blue flecked with sun, noon wavering, gold water fringed with black grasses. Nothing here to cast shade, measure the afternoon's retreat, its fading fall into darkness over marsh and meadow. Sky, you patient watcher of all creation, bend to the sleeping water, embrace it wholly through the dark hours, then rise to bring us again light's benediction. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What a gift you are.
Oh,
That was a gift. Thank you
Thank you,
so
thank you.
much, Rhina.
well, I was a little shaky because these guys scared me.
You had nothing to worry about. Nothing. My favorite was when you read in Spanish. For some reason, when I hear poems in Spanish, even though I can't understand all the words, they speak so deeply to me.
You
And
know, I've had that said to me before. Yeah.
Huh?
You. Well, it's a beautiful language, but I'll tell you what, I fell in love with English right away.
Right.
I
But
did.
I don't know. When I hear it in Spanish, it's just stunning. And it was fun to try and pick out the words.
Thank you very much.
Very beautiful and moving. And I still believe that you should have your own podcast. Thank you so much, Rhina. I'm so grateful that I got to hear all these wonderful poets. I got to meet you. And I really did feel like it was
This
a
was an
gift.
absolute treat, a real treat.
It really was. This was a wonderful reading. So I have to thank Simmons too, I guess, for inviting me to host, because this was incredible. It was lovely to meet you. Thank you so much, Rhina.
Well, I'm lovely to meet all of you. Some of you I've met before, but I'm so glad to meet, and the two readers, you were so powerful. These poems about bitter things that happen that we don't want to accept, but that we have to because they're real, they're reality. That's the hardest kind of poetry to write.
Really, they were
Thank you. That's honored. That's an honor just to hear you say that, Rhina. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's just you don't know what, and you had such wonderful images, and so such leaps from thoughts to thoughts to thoughts to thoughts. Oh, gee.
Thank you.
Very evocative.
Is there anything like poetry? There isn't.
This was wonderful. Thank you guys so much for coming. I guess we're going to be taking questions. If anyone has questions, let us know. This is odd, like everybody muted and talking. It's very strange.
Yeah, feel free to unmute and ask a question.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask these incredible poets?
Yes, Rhina, how much will it take to get you to fly out here and read to my daughters like that?
We should do a Zoom sometime.
Oh!
After hearing what your daughter wrote, you remember when the time that you read something, but I want to do a Zoom with you.
Okay. It's a date, my dear.
Okay. But tell her I need new poems.
Okay. I'll do it. Hot dog. And thank you for teaching me how to say hot dog in Spanish.
Hot dog.
Why are we talking about hot dogs again?
Before we go down that road, any other questions for our wonderful readers tonight?
I have a question for Chaun. I've also lived in Alaska. And so if you've ever lived in Alaska, a moose poem is something that you can really appreciate. And I'm just curious as to where in Alaska you live.
All right, thank you very much for that question. And yeah, I lived in Fairbanks for about 2 years, and then the rest in Anchorage. Yeah, and so like you said, moose are very common. You see them walking down the street, and most people know to stay away from them. But the first time I saw a moose, I tried to chase after it, and then I wanted to get a good picture, and my wife said, that's not a good idea. And when I turned around, I realized that all the Alaskans were behind me. And then I knew it was a bad idea to chase the moose. So I figured it's probably best to write about them from a distance.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. I love that poem.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, that was a wonderful poem.
Any other questions?
Simmons?
Oh.
Oh, well,
Okay.
at the risk of keeping people and asking a question as a reader, can I ask Rhina something?
Sure.
This is really a chance to, in 2014, you were the final judge for the Andres Montoya Poetry Prize, if that rings a bell. And
Which one?
It was the Andres Montoya Poetry
Yes,
Prize.
yes.
Andres, the late Andres Montoya was a good friend of mine, and
Is that right?
you awarded it to a former student, David Campos. And so it's always been sort of a secret hope that I would meet you in person. So I guess my question would be, just in those poems, there's so much grace.
In Campus's poems?
No, in the
Oh,
poems
mine.
you read tonight, there's so much grace. Sorry, that was kind of a big leap. But can you just talk about grace in your work?
Well, I'm not sure that grace is what it is. I think acceptance is what it is. Because as happens to everybody who is growing older, the news gets sadder and sadder. The losses kind of gang up on you because you lose friends that you've had for years. You lose members of your family. Eventually you lose a spouse. So that, as someone very wise once said to me, Rhina, dear, life is a series of losses. And it is. And what may sound like grace to you is really myself reminding myself of how much I have had in this life, how much I should be grateful for, and how ungrateful it would be to think only of the losses and not of the things that I've had long enough to regret losing. So it's really a matter of saying, count your blessings, even though they're gone, because you can't lose something if you have not had it. And we all have to get used to that and learn that. I've had a lot of arguments with God. I write poems about them a lot, but eventually we end up on speaking terms.
Thank you.
You know, Rhina, I hear what you're saying, but I want to agree with Lee a little bit here. And I feel a lot of grace in your work too, tonight and always on the page, whether you're reading it or whether I'm reading it. And I think, I listen, to me, I think part of it is the nature of your poetry. And I, whenever I read you, I'm like, damn, I got to write more metered poems and I got to in rhyme. But I think I think there is a grace to the formal nature of your work.
That's another story. That's another story. The thing is that, well, I've got three ingredients to poems. I've always thought of them as a three-part thing. There's the idea, there's the imagery, and there's the music. Or the way I sometimes tell students, it's the music first, because that's what hooks you by the ear. It really is a kind of music. It's closer to music than it is to prose. And if you read it only on paper, it's as if you were reading the notes to a symphony. You're reading the symbol of what you should be hearing, but the sound is what matters in poetry. So it's first the music, and then after that, the images, the pictures that you make in your mind from what's told to you. And then after that, you finally, if there's time, you get to the intellect, because I'm no great intellect. What I am is wide awake when it comes to senses. I love smells and sounds, and I love dancing. and so on. So, I write mostly through the ear and for the ear. And the first thing I hear when a new poem is coming is a drum beat. I don't even know what it is I'm thinking, but I hear something going.
Interesting.
And then the words begin to fill in, and the words tell me what it is that's bugging me.
When you say that you're no intellect, that reminds me of Socrates saying he's no intellect.
Well, he did die younger than he had to.
Oh my God.
We're starting a show, you guys. We're starting the Rhina show. This is the first night. Okay.
This is wonderful.
Well,
This is the most fun I've had in a long time. So thank you. Thank you all.
thank you all. I am happy as a bird dog in tall grass.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, any other?
I'm coming next month too.
Well, let me, before too many folks leave us, let me give a special shout out and thanks to Suzanne for hosting us this evening, and
Thank
to
you.
Chaun and Lee and Rhina for joining us for such beautiful, wonderful, powerful readings, and delightful as well. So thank you all. And don't forget to join us. I
want applause for the audience.
And applause for the audience. Thank you, audience. Don't forget to join us on Monday, June 28th, when our own Elizabeth Dodd will host Sandra Steingraber and Taylor Brorby and Tammy Parker Song for what I know will be a very powerful reading because all three of them are wonderful artists and activists.
Wouldn't miss it.
Thanks
Good night.
all. Have a great evening.
Good night.